I thought I had learned to read people after 68 years on this earth, but sometimes the cruelest betrayals come from those we trust most. There I stood, frozen in my friend's doorway, watching the man I was falling in love with holding her hand like they were already a couple. In that moment, I realized that, while I had been carefully nursing my wounded heart back to health, my dearest friend had been systematically destroying any chance I had at happiness again. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Rosemary Thompson, and until 6 months ago, I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone. Not by choice, mind you, but because after losing my Frank 2 years ago, I couldn't imagine my heart having room for anyone else. Frank and I had been married for 43 beautiful years, and when cancer took him, I thought it took my capacity for romantic love with him. But hearts, I've learned, are stubborn things. They heal when you least expect them to, and they open when you think they're sealed forever. It started innocently enough at the Riverside Community Center. I had been going there twice a week for the past year, mostly for the watercolor painting classes. Art had always been my escape, even during my 40 years as a pediatric nurse. Something about mixing colors and watching them bloom across paper reminded me that beauty could still emerge from nothing. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I first really noticed Harold Mitchell. Of course I had seen him before. He was hard to miss with his tall frame and distinguished silver hair. But that particular morning he was sitting alone at the corner table during coffee hour, reading a worn copy of The Bridges of Madison County. "Good book?" I had asked, surprising myself with my boldness. He looked up with the kindest brown eyes I had ever seen and smiled. "It's my 3rd time reading it. My wife used to say I was a romantic fool for loving this story so much." The word, was, hung between us with gentle understanding. We were both members of that unwanted club, the widowed, the ones left behind to figure out how to live with half a heart. My Frank always teased me about my romance novels. I found myself said I was filling my head with impossible dreams. "A Harry," he insisted I call him Harry from that very first conversation, laughed softly. "Maybe that's exactly what we need sometimes. Impossible dreams." That simple exchange opened a door I thought had been permanently closed. Over the following weeks, Harry and I began talking more. He would save me a seat during the community lunches. I would bring him a cup of coffee, remembering without being asked that he liked it black with just a touch of honey. Small gestures that felt enormous to a heart learning to hope again. Harry was 71, 3 years older than me, and had lost his wife Margaret to a stroke 18 months earlier. He had 2 grown children who lived out of state, much like my own daughter Sarah, who had moved to Portland with her family. We understood each other's loneliness, the way dinner for one felt wrong. How holidays had become something to endure rather than celebrate. But we also understood the guilt that came with feeling alive again. "Some days I forget she's gone," Harry confided one afternoon as we walked around the community center's garden. "I'll see something funny and turn to share it with her, and for just a moment, I expect her to be there." "I do the same thing," I admitted. Frank used to make fun of how I talked to the plants when I gardened. Last week, I caught myself asking the roses what they thought about the new fertilizer, and for a second, I was waiting for his laugh. These conversations created an intimacy I hadn't expected to feel again. We weren't trying to replace our lost loves. We were 2 people who understood that the heart could hold both grief and new hope at the same time. My friend Patty Williams had been encouraging from the beginning, or so I thought. Patty and I had been friends for over 15 years, ever since we worked together organizing the annual hospital charity drive. She was also a widow, having lost her husband Robert 5 years ago, and she had been my rock during Frank's illness and after his passing. "It's wonderful to see you smiling again, Rose," she would say whenever I mentioned Harry. "You deserve happiness. Frank would want you to find companionship." Patty seemed genuinely pleased about my budding friendship with Harry. She would ask about our conversations, encourage me to invite him to coffee outside of the community center, and even helped me pick out a new dress for the center's spring dance. "You should wear the blue one," she had said just last week, holding up a soft periwinkle dress we had found at the boutique downtown. "It brings out your eyes. Harry won't be able to take his gaze off you." I had blushed like a schoolgirl. At 68, I felt foolish for the butterflies in my stomach, but Patty had laughed and said, "Love doesn't have an expiration date, honey. If anything, we appreciate it more now because we know how precious it is." Those words had given me permission to hope. For the first time in 2 years, I started thinking about the future in terms of we, instead of just I. Maybe Harry and I could take that cooking class he had mentioned. Maybe we could visit the botanical gardens when spring really arrived. Maybe, just maybe, I could love again without betraying Frank's memory. Last Friday, Harry had walked me to my car after art class, and as I fumbled with my keys, he had gently touched my hand. "Rose," he had said softly, "I hope you know how much these past few weeks have meant to me. I haven't felt this hopeful in a very long time." My heart had nearly stopped. "I feel the same way, Harry." He had squeezed my hand gently. "I'd like to take you to dinner, somewhere nice. Would you like that?" I had barely managed to whisper, "Yes," before he smiled that wonderful smile and said, "I'll call you tomorrow to make plans." That was Friday. Saturday came and went without a call. Sunday too. By Monday, I was worried something had happened to him. When he didn't show up for the community lunch on Tuesday, I asked Mrs. Patterson at the front desk if she had heard from him. "Oh, Harry mentioned he might be taking a few days away," she said casually. "Something about visiting an old friend, I think?" I tried not to feel hurt. People had lives outside the community center, of course. Maybe something urgent had come up. Maybe his phone wasn't working. There could be a dozen innocent explanations. But the doubt crept in anyway. Had I misread our connection? Had I been foolish to think a man like Harry could be genuinely interested in me? Frank used to say I was too trusting, too ready to see the best in people. Maybe my judgment about romance was as rusty as everything else. It was Patty who suggested I stop worrying. "You're overthinking this, Rose," she said when I called her Tuesday evening. "Men are different creatures. They don't always think to call when we think they should. Give him time." "But he seemed so sincere," I said, hating how needy I sounded. "He said he'd call Saturday, and maybe he will still call. It's only been a few days. You know how I felt after Robert died. Every small disappointment felt like the end of the world because our emotions were so raw. Don't let your anxiety sabotage something good." Patty's advice made sense. She had always been the practical one, the voice of reason when my emotions ran high. "You're probably right," I admitted. "I'm just scared, I guess. It's been so long since I felt vulnerable like this." "That's exactly why you need to be patient with yourself and with Harry. Real feelings are worth waiting for." Wednesday morning, I woke up feeling more optimistic. Patty was right, I was overthinking things. Harry would call when he was ready, and we would have that dinner. I spent the morning tending to my small garden, talking to my roses just like I always did, feeling Frank's presence in the warm sunshine and the smell of fresh earth. Around noon, Patty called with an invitation that seemed perfectly timed. "Rose, honey, why don't you come over this afternoon? I made too much of my famous chicken salad, and you know how it goes bad quickly. Plus, I could use the company. These rainy days make me feel cooped up." Patty lived in a charming cottage about 10 minutes from my house, and I always enjoyed our visits. Her home was warm and inviting, filled with photos of her travels and beautiful quilts she made herself. A visit with my dear friend was exactly what I needed to take my mind off worrying about Harry. "That sounds lovely," I said. "Should I bring anything? Just yourself?" "Oh, and maybe that new tea you mentioned, the chamomile blend. I'd love to try it." "Of course. I'll be there around 2. I spent the rest of the morning puttering around the house, choosing a comfortable sweater and making sure I had the tea Patty wanted. It felt good to have plans, to have someone who cared about my company. Patty had been such a faithful friend, especially during the darkest days after Frank's death. She deserved all the appreciation I could give her. At exactly 2 o'clock, I pulled into Patty's driveway, noting that she had already started planting her spring flowers. Her front garden was always immaculate, much more organized than my own chaotic but cheerful yard. I grabbed the chamomile tea from the passenger seat and walked up the familiar stone path to her front door. I rang the doorbell and waited, listening to the sound of footsteps approaching. The door opened, and Patty greeted me with her usual warm smile. "Rose!" Perfect timing. "Come in, come in." But as I stepped into her foyer, I heard voices coming from the living room. Male and female voices speaking in low, intimate tones. Patty saw my confused expression and said quickly, "Oh, I hope you don't mind. I have another visitor today. Someone I think you'll be surprised to see." My heart began to race, but not with excitement. Something in Patty's tone, something in the way she avoided my eyes, made every instinct I possessed suddenly alert. I followed her toward the living room, the sound of those voices growing clearer. And then I saw them. Harry was sitting on Patty's couch. Not in the awkward way people sit when they're just being polite, but comfortably, familiarly. His arm was resting along the back of the sofa, and Patty's reading glasses were on the coffee table, next to what looked like a half-finished crossword puzzle, the kind couples work on together. But it was their hands that made my world tilt sideways. Harry was holding Patty's hand, their fingers intertwined in the casual way that speaks of intimacy, of comfort, of relationships that have moved far beyond friendship. They both looked up as I entered the room, and I saw something I will never forget: guilt. Pure, unmistakable guilt flashed across both their faces before they quickly dropped their hands and tried to rearrange themselves into more innocent positions. "Rose," Harry said, standing up quickly. What a surprise to see you here. A surprise. The man who had asked me to dinner just 5 days ago was surprised to see me at my best friend's house. The man who had told me I made him feel hopeful again was sitting in my friend's living room, looking like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Hello, Harry," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "I thought you were visiting an old friend out of town." The silence that followed was deafening. Patty and Harry exchanged a look, the kind of look that passes between people who share secrets, who have discussed what they would do if this exact situation arose. "Well," Patty said with false brightness, "wasn't this nice? All 3 of us together. Harry was just telling me about his trip. It got cancelled at the last minute, didn't it, Harry?" Harry nodded, but he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Yes, that's right, last-minute change of plans." I stood there in my friend's living room, still holding the chamomile tea I had brought to share, and felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't an innocent visit between casual acquaintances. The way they had been sitting together, the comfortable intimacy of their body language, the guilt in their eyes, it all pointed to one impossible, heartbreaking conclusion. While I had been carefully opening my heart, trusting both my friend and this man with my fragile hopes, they had been building something together behind my back. All of Patty's encouragement, all her advice about being patient, all her reassurances about Harry's character, had it all been lies? "I should go," I heard myself saying. "I forgot I have an appointment." "Rose, don't be silly," Patty said. But there was something desperate in her voice now. "Stay for tea." "Harry was just leaving anyway, weren't you, Harry?" A Harry looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should." "No," I said firmly, finding my voice at last. "Please don't leave on my account. I can see you two have things to discuss." I turned and walked back toward the foyer, hearing Patty call my name behind me. My hands were shaking as I reached for the door handle, and I nearly dropped the package of tea I was still clutching. "Rose." "Wait." Patty caught up with me at the door. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." I turned to face her, this woman who had been my friend for 15 years, who had held my hand at Frank's funeral, who had encouraged me to open my heart to love again. "What is it then, Patty? What exactly should I think about finding the man I'm falling in love with, holding hands with my best friend?" Her face crumpled. "Rose, I never meant for this to happen. Harry and I, we connected. I tried to fight it, I really did, but..." "How long?" I asked quietly. "What? How long have you two been connecting?" Patty couldn't answer. She just stood there with tears in her eyes, and I had my answer. It had been going on for weeks, maybe longer. All those times she had encouraged me to be patient with Harry. All those conversations where she had listened to me talk about my growing feelings for him, she had already known he was hers. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. "I hope you'll be very happy together," I said, and I meant it. What else could I say? "Rose, please, let's talk about this. You're my dearest friend. I never wanted to hurt you." I turned back one last time. Harry had appeared behind her in the doorway, looking miserable but not surprised. This conversation had been inevitable, and they both knew it. "If I was truly your dearest friend, Patty, you would have told me the truth from the beginning. You would have given me the chance to step aside gracefully instead of letting me make a fool of myself." I walked to my car, placed the unopened package of chamomile tea on the passenger seat, and drove away from the cottage where I had just learned that the heart's capacity for hope is matched only by its capacity for heartbreak. As I drove home through the familiar streets of our small town, I realized that I wasn't just losing Harry. I was losing the friendship I had counted on to help me through this exact kind of pain. The person I would have called to cry about a romantic disappointment was the same person who had caused it. But even in that moment of fresh grief, something inside me refused to break completely. I had survived losing Frank. I had learned to live alone, to find joy in small things, to believe in the possibility of love again. This betrayal hurt. It hurt more than I had words for, but it wasn't going to destroy me. I was stronger than that, stronger than I had been even a year ago. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I was going to figure out how to heal from this, how to trust again, how to distinguish between true friends and those who would sacrifice my happiness for their own. I was going to survive this, just like I had survived everything else. But first, I was going to let myself cry. The tears came as soon as I closed my front door behind me. Not the gentle, cleansing tears that sometimes come with sad movies or touching memories, but the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't even know it existed. I sat right there on my entryway floor, still wearing my sweater and holding my purse, and let 15 years of friendship and 6 weeks of tentative hope wash away in salt water. Lucy, my tabby cat, appeared from wherever she had been napping and rubbed against my leg with that uncanny ability cats have for sensing distress. I gathered her into my lap and buried my face in her soft fur, grateful for the one relationship in my life that asked nothing of me except food and the occasional scratch behind the ears. "Well, Lucy girl," I whispered into her fur, "it seems your mama is a fool, after all." After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, I managed to pull myself together enough to make a cup of tea. My hands were still shaking as I filled the kettle, and I found myself reaching for the chamomile blend I had intended to share with Patty. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, needing the very comfort I had planned to offer my friend, the friend who had just broken my heart. As the tea steeped, I tried to make sense of what I had witnessed. The comfortable way Harry and Patty had been sitting together spoke of familiarity that went far beyond a recent connection. How long had this been going on? How many of our conversations about Harry had been lies? I thought back to last week when Patty had helped me choose that blue dress for the spring dance. Had she already known that Harry wouldn't be taking me? Had she been planning to attend with him herself, while encouraging me to buy a dress for a date that would never happen? The questions multiplied in my mind like weeds, each one more painful than the last. Every encouraging word Patty had spoken, every piece of advice about being patient with Harry, every reassurance about his character, had it all been part of some elaborate deception? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Patty's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach clenched. I let it ring through to voicemail, then immediately rang again, and again. On the fourth call, I finally answered. "Rose, thank goodness." Patty's voice was thick with tears. "Please don't hang up. Let me explain." "I'm listening," I said, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "Harry and I, it wasn't supposed to happen. We met 3 weeks ago when I was at the community center picking up flyers for the church bake sale. He was there early, before your art class, and we just started talking. About Robert, about Margaret, about how hard it is to be alone. 3 weeks ago." My mind raced backward. 3 weeks ago was when Harry had first asked me to save him a seat at lunch, when he had started bringing me coffee, when I thought our friendship was deepening into something more. "Go on," I said quietly. "We realized we had so much in common, Rose. We're both night owls, we both struggle with insomnia. We both love old movies and crossword puzzles. We both lost our spouses to sudden illnesses that gave us no time to prepare." Patty's voice broke slightly. It felt so natural, so easy. Before I knew it, we were talking on the phone every evening, meeting for coffee before the community center opened. Every evening. While I had been at home, cherishing the memory of brief conversations with Harry during official center hours, he had been having long, intimate phone calls with my best friend. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why did you let me go on thinking?" "Because I knew how you felt about him," Patty cried. "You lit up whenever you mentioned his name. You were so hopeful, so happy, and I couldn't bear to take that away from you. I thought maybe what Harry and I were feeling would fade. I thought maybe if I gave you time, you and he would find your way to each other. But we didn't, did we? He chose you." The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. "Rose," Patty said finally, "I never meant for this to happen. If I could change it." "But you can't," I interrupted. And you wouldn't, would you? You love him. Another long pause. Yes, she whispered. I do. Despite everything, I felt a strange sense of relief at finally hearing the truth. Does he love you? He says he cares for me deeply. We're taking things slowly, being respectful of our spouse's memories. But yes, I think he might. I closed my eyes and tried to picture Harry saying those words to Patty, the same kinds of words I had hoped to hear from him myself. It shouldn't have surprised me. Harry was a good man, capable of deep feeling. I had been drawn to exactly those qualities in him. What about our friendship, Patty? I asked. Was any of that real, or was it all just you keeping track of your competition? Rose! Patty sounded genuinely horrified. How can you ask that? You're my dearest friend. Our friendship is real. It's the most real thing in my life. Then why does it feel like you've been lying to me for weeks? Because I have been. Her honesty surprised me. I've been lying to you, and I've been lying to myself. I kept telling myself that I was protecting you, that I was being kind. But the truth is, I was being selfish. I wanted Harry, and I wanted to keep you as my friend, and I convinced myself I could have both without anyone getting hurt. Well, someone did get hurt, I said softly. I know. And I'm so sorry. I would do anything to take back the pain I've caused you. Anything except give up Harry. The words hung between us like a challenge. I wasn't even sure why I had said them. I didn't want Patty to sacrifice her happiness for mine. But I needed to know where I stood, needed to understand what I was worth in the equation of our friendship. Rose, that's not fair. Isn't it? You're asking me to forgive you for betraying my trust. For letting me make a fool of myself, for stealing away the first man I've had feelings for since Frank died. And you want to keep him and keep me too. That seems like asking for everything while giving up nothing. What do you want me to do? Patty asked, and for the first time, she sounded angry instead of guilty. Do you want me to tell Harry it's over? Do you want me to sacrifice my chance at happiness so you can have yours? The anger in her voice revealed something I hadn't fully grasped before. Patty wasn't just sorry she had hurt me. She was resentful that I was making her choice difficult. In her mind, I was being unreasonable for not gracefully stepping aside so she could have what she wanted without consequences. I don't want you to do anything, Patty, I said, feeling suddenly very tired. I want you to have already done the right thing weeks ago when this started. But since we can't go back in time, I just want you to be honest about what you're choosing. I'm choosing love, she said quietly. Maybe that makes me selfish, but I'm 66 years old, Rose. Robert has been gone for 5 years. This might be my last chance at real companionship, at not being alone. Can you understand that? I could understand it. That was the worst part. I understood it completely because it was exactly what I had been feeling about Harry. The fear that this might be the last chance, the desperate hope that loneliness didn't have to be permanent, the willingness to risk heartbreak for the possibility of love. I understand, I said. But I also understand that you were willing to let me risk my heart on someone who was never really available. You were willing to let me hope for something you knew wasn't going to happen. I thought maybe Harry would choose you. In the beginning, I really thought he might. He talked about you sometimes, said you were sweet and kind. I thought if you two spent more time together. But he didn't choose me. He chose you. And you knew that, didn't you? You've known for a while. Yes, she admitted. I've known for about a week. A week. Harry had asked me to dinner on Friday, and Patty had known for a week that he was never going to follow through. She had known when she helped me pick out the blue dress. She had known when I called her worried about why he hadn't called. She had known and let me twist in the wind of my own uncertainty. I need some time, Patty, I said. I need to think about all of this. How much time? The question revealed everything I needed to know about where I stood in Patty's priorities. She wasn't asking because she was worried about me. She was asking because my hurt feelings were inconvenient to her new relationship. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe a long time. Rose, please don't let this ruin our friendship. We've been through so much together. I'm not the one who ruined our friendship, Patty. You need to understand that. I hung up before she could respond, then immediately turned off my phone. I needed silence, needed space to process what I had learned and figure out what came next. The house felt impossibly quiet, without the distraction of Patty's voice. I wandered from room to room, seeing familiar objects as if for the first time. The photo of Patty and me at last year's hospital charity auction, both of us laughing at some shared joke. The ceramic mug she had given me for Christmas. painted with sunflowers because she knew they were my favorite. The friendship quilt she had made for me after Frank's funeral, each square representing a memory we shared. How do you reconcile 15 years of genuine friendship with the realization that someone you trusted was capable of such calculated deception? How do you separate the real memories from the ones that might have been lies? I picked up the sunflower mug and held it in my hands, remembering the morning Patty had presented it to me with such pride in her handiwork. Had that moment been real? Had her friendship been real then, even if it wasn't real now? The questions were making my head ache. I set the mug back on the shelf and decided to do something concrete, something that would help me feel less powerless in the face of all this betrayal. I was going to call the community center and find out exactly when Harry and Patty had first started spending time together. Mrs. Patterson, the volunteer coordinator, had worked there for 20 years and knew everyone's business. If anyone could help me piece together the timeline of this deception, it would be her. But first, I needed to eat something. I had been too excited about seeing Harry again to eat much breakfast, and the emotional turmoil of the afternoon had left me feeling shaky and weak. I made myself a simple sandwich and forced myself to eat it, even though it tasted like cardboard. As I ate, I found myself thinking about something Patty had said, that she and Harry were both night owls, both struggled with insomnia. I had never known that about Patty. In 15 years of friendship, she had never mentioned having trouble sleeping. But then again, maybe there were a lot of things about Patty I didn't know. Maybe I had been so busy grieving Frank and trying to rebuild my own life that I hadn't been paying attention to the changes in my friend. Maybe Patty had been lonely and struggling too, and I had been too self-absorbed to notice. The thought made me feel guilty, but also confused. If Patty had been struggling with loneliness, why hadn't she talked to me about it? We had always shared our problems, always been there for each other during difficult times. Why had she hidden her insomnia, her struggles, her growing feelings for Harry? Unless she hadn't hidden them from everyone. Unless she had only hidden them from me, because she knew they would complicate the situation with Harry. My phone, which I had turned back on to call Mrs. Patterson, buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Rose, this is Harry. Patty gave me your number. Could we talk?" My heart started racing again. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to maintain the dignity I had shown when leaving Patty's house. But another part of me needed to hear what he had to say, needed to understand his role in this deception. I typed back, "I'm listening." My phone rang almost immediately. "Rose, thank you for taking my call," Harry's familiar voice said. "I know this is awkward, but I felt like I owed you an explanation." "You don't owe me anything, Harry. We were just friends." "Were we?" Because it felt like more than that to me. His words caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I enjoyed our conversations. I looked forward to seeing you. I meant what I said about asking you to dinner." "Then why didn't you call?" Harry sighed deeply. "Because Patty asked me not to." The simple honesty of his answer was somehow more shocking than if he had lied. "She asked you not to call me." "She told me that you had mentioned being overwhelmed by the idea of dating again. She said you were worried about betraying Frank's memory, and that you needed more time. She suggested I give you space to figure out what you really wanted." I felt the ground shifting beneath me again. "When did she tell you this?" "Saturday morning. I was getting ready to call you about dinner plans when she called me. She said she was worried about you, that you had confided in her about feeling guilty for having romantic feelings. She convinced me that the kindest thing I could do was wait for you to reach out when you were ready." Patty had sabotaged my date with Harry by using my own words against me. Yes, I had talked to her about feeling guilty sometimes when I found myself attracted to Harry. Yes, I had worried about betraying Frank's memory. But I had also told her that I was working through those feelings, that I was ready to try opening my heart again. She had taken my moments of vulnerability and doubt and twisted them into reasons for Harry to stay away from me. And then she had stepped into the space she had created. "Harry," I said slowly, "when did you and Patty start spending time together?" "That same Saturday. After she called about you, she mentioned that she was struggling with some of the same feelings about dating again. We decided to meet for coffee to talk about it, as friends who understood what each other was going through." "And it became more than that?" "Yes," he admitted. "Neither of us planned it, Rose. We both felt guilty about it, but we connected in a way that felt right, natural, like we had been looking for each other without realizing it. I believed him. Harry wasn't a manipulative man, he was someone who had been manipulated just as much as I had. Patty had orchestrated the entire situation, removing me from Harry's path while positioning herself as the understanding friend who could help him navigate his grief and loneliness. "Did you know I had feelings for you?" I asked. "I suspected you might, and I had feelings for you too, Rose. That's what made Patty's call so confusing. I thought we were building something together." "We were. Or we could have been. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have called you directly. Should have talked to you about what I was feeling instead of letting Patty speak for you. I realize now that I let my own uncertainty make me take the easy way out." His apology felt genuine, but it didn't change the fundamental reality of our situation. "Do you love her, Harry?" The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know. "I think I might," he said quietly. "I didn't expect it, I didn't want it to happen this way. But Patty and we fit together in ways I wasn't expecting. We balance each other, then I'm happy for you both," I said, and I tried to mean it. "Really?" I considered the question seriously. Was I happy for them? Could I be? "I'm happy that you found love," I said finally. "I'm hurt by how it happened, and I'm angry at the deception, but I don't wish either of you unhappiness. Life is too short and love is too precious. You're a remarkable woman, Rose. I hope you know that." "I'm a woman who deserves honesty from her friends," I replied. "That's not remarkable, that's basic human respect." "You're right. We should have told you from the beginning." "Yes, you should have. But you didn't, and now we all have to live with the consequences." After I hung up with Harry, I sat in my quiet kitchen and tried to process everything I had learned. The situation was more complex than I had initially thought, but also more hurtful. Patty hadn't just fallen in love with the same man I had feelings for, she had actively worked to remove me as competition, while presenting herself as the better alternative. She had used my own vulnerabilities against me, twisted my honest conversations about grief and guilt into reasons why Harry should stay away from me. She had stolen my chance at love not through fair competition, but through manipulation and deception. And yet, Harry's words rang in my ears. He and Patty fit together, balanced each other. Maybe they were genuinely well-suited. Maybe even without Patty's manipulation, Harry would have chosen her in the end. But I would never know, would I? The possibility of honest choice had been taken away from all of us by Patty's deception. As the sun set outside my kitchen window, I realized that I was facing a choice of my own. I could let this betrayal harden my heart, could use it as proof that I was foolish to hope for love again. I could retreat back into the safe loneliness I had known before meeting Harry, where no one could hurt me because I refused to let anyone close enough to try. Or I could choose to see this as a lesson about the difference between real friends and false ones, between honest love and manipulative control. I could choose to believe that somewhere out there were people worthy of my trust and affection, people who would choose honesty over convenience, friendship over self-interest. I looked at the ceramic mug on my shelf, the friendship quilt draped over my couch, the photo of Patty and me laughing together. These objects represented 15 years of what I had thought was genuine friendship. Did Patty's recent betrayal erase all the good times, all the mutual support, all the shared joys and sorrows? I didn't know. But I did know that I couldn't let her choices define my future any more than I could let Frank's death define my capacity for happiness. Tomorrow, I would start the work of rebuilding my life again. I would figure out how to trust my own judgment, how to recognize authentic friendship, how to open my heart without losing my dignity. Tonight, I would grieve not just for Harry, but for the friend I thought I had known for 15 years. And then, like I had done after Frank's death, I would begin the slow work of healing. But this time, I would be more careful about who I trusted with my heart. I woke up Thursday morning with the strange clarity that sometimes follows a night of difficult decisions. The crying was done, the initial shock had worn off, and what remained was a determination I hadn't felt in months. I was going to find out exactly what had happened, not to punish anyone, but because I deserved to know the full truth about how my life had been manipulated. After a simple breakfast of toast and coffee, I called the Riverside Community Center and asked to speak with Mrs. Patterson. Eleanor Patterson had been the volunteer coordinator there for 20 years, and if anyone knew the real timeline of Harry and Patty's relationship, it would be her. "Rose, dear." Patterson's cheerful voice came through the phone. "How lovely to hear from you. Are you calling about the spring volunteer schedule? Actually, Eleanor, I was hoping you might be able to help me with something else. It's a bit delicate. Oh, her tone became more attentive. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath. I'm trying to understand when Harry Mitchell and Patty Williams first started spending time together at the center. Have you noticed them meeting before or after regular activities? There was a pause, and I could practically hear Eleanor's mind working. She was discreet by nature, but she was also observant and genuinely cared about the people who came to the center. Rose, honey, is everything all right? You sound upset. I'm fine, I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. I just need to understand some things about their friendship. Well, Eleanor said carefully, I have noticed them together quite a bit lately. Harry started coming in early about 3 weeks ago, around 8:30, before most activities start. At first I thought he was just eager to get his day going, but then I noticed Patty arriving around the same time. 3 weeks ago, just like Patty had told me. Have you seen them together during regular hours? When other people are around? That's the interesting thing, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. During regular activities, they barely seem to acknowledge each other. It's only when they think no one is watching that I've seen them talking intimately. Yesterday, for instance, I came in early to set up for the morning craft class and found them in the small conference room, holding hands and looking at what appeared to be travel brochures. Travel brochures. They were already making plans for a future together while I was still wondering why Harry hadn't called about our dinner date. Eleanor, you've known me for years. Do you think I'm foolish for not realizing what was happening? Oh, honey, Eleanor's voice was full of sympathy. Love makes fools of us all sometimes. And from what I observed, you had no reason to suspect anything. During regular activities, Harry always seemed genuinely interested in talking with you. He would light up when you walked into a room. But he chose Patty. Did he, or was the choice made for him? Eleanor's question surprised me. What do you mean? Well, I couldn't help but notice that whenever you and Harry seemed to be having a particularly good conversation, Patty would find a reason to interrupt or redirect the conversation to include her. And she's been asking a lot of questions about Harry, when he comes in, what activities he enjoys, whether he's mentioned any family or personal details. You think she was gathering information? I think Patty is a smart woman who saw something she wanted and went after it strategically. That doesn't necessarily make her evil, Rose, but it does make her calculating. After I hung up with Eleanor, I sat in my living room trying to process what I had learned. The picture that was emerging was of a woman who had systematically studied Harry, learned his preferences and vulnerabilities, and then positioned herself to meet his emotional needs while ensuring I couldn't compete on equal footing. It was impressive, in a terrible way, and it made me question everything I thought I knew about my friend of 15 years. My doorbell rang around noon, interrupting my brooding. I wasn't expecting anyone and briefly wondered if it might be Patty, coming to continue our conversation from the day before. But when I opened the door, I found someone I had never expected to see on my doorstep. Mrs. Thompson? My name is Margaret Chen. I'm Harry Mitchell's daughter-in-law. She was a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. I had heard Harry mention his son David and daughter-in-law Margaret, but they lived in Seattle and rarely visited. Oh, I said, taken aback. Please come in. Is everything all right? Is Harry okay? Margaret stepped into my foyer and looked around uncertainly. Harry is fine physically. But I'm here because I'm worried about him, and I think you might be the only person who can help me understand what's happening. I led her into the living room, my mind racing. Can I get you some coffee? Tea. Coffee would be lovely, thank you. As I prepared coffee in the kitchen, I could hear Margaret moving around the living room. And when I returned with a tray, I found her looking at the photos on my mantelpiece. You were married a long time, she said, gesturing to a photo of Frank and me on our 40th anniversary. 43 years, I said, setting down the coffee. I lost him 2 years ago. I'm sorry. Harry told us about his new friends at the community center, and he mentioned that you had also lost your husband recently. He spoke very fondly of you. Did he? Despite everything, I felt a flutter of something validation, perhaps, or simply the comfort of knowing that my feelings hadn't been entirely one-sided. Margaret settled onto my couch and accepted the coffee I offered. Mrs. Thompson, I hope you don't mind my coming here unannounced. David and I flew down from Seattle yesterday because we were concerned about some changes we've noticed in Harry. What kind of changes? He's been secretive, evasive. When we call him, he cuts conversations short or seems distracted. He's mentioned a woman named Patty several times, but when we ask about her directly, he changes the subject. Yesterday, he told us he's thinking about selling his house and moving to a senior community. I nearly spilled my coffee. Selling his house. He's lived in that house for 35 years. He and my mother-in-law raised their children there. It's where all the family memories are. For him to suddenly want to sell it. Margaret shook her head. It's completely out of character. Maybe he just wants a change, I said carefully, not sure how much I should reveal about Harry's relationship with Patty. That's what we thought at first. But then we did some research into senior communities in the area, and we discovered that this Patty person has been inquiring about joint applications for couples. The timing is very suspicious. My stomach dropped. Joint applications for a 2-bedroom unit in Sunrise Manor, that new development on the other side of town. When we confronted Harry about it, he became defensive and angry. He's never spoken to us that way before. I set down my coffee cup with shaking hands. Patty and Harry were already planning to move in together, and they had only been officially dating for 3 weeks. The speed of it was breathtaking and alarming. Mrs. Thompson, Margaret continued, I know this is awkward, but we're worried that Harry is being manipulated by someone who sees his loneliness and grief as an opportunity. David's mother died just 18 months ago. Harry is vulnerable right now, and he's never been good at seeing the worst in people. What makes you think I can help? Because you knew Harry before this Patty woman came into the picture. You can tell us if the man we're seeing now is the same man you knew, or if he's changed in ways that concern you. I looked at this woman who had traveled across the country because she was worried about her father-in-law, and I made a decision to trust her with the truth. Margaret, I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear. Over the next hour, I told Margaret everything. About my growing friendship with Harry, about Patty's encouragement and apparent support, about discovering them together, about learning the extent of Patty's manipulation. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. My God, she said when I finished. It's worse than we thought. What do you mean? This woman isn't just manipulating Harry, she's isolating him from anyone who might question her motives or interfere with her plans. She's moved him away from his normal social activities, convinced him to make major life decisions at lightning speed, and from what you're telling me, she's done it all while presenting herself as a selfless friend looking out for his best interests. Margaret's assessment sent a chill through me. I had been so focused on my own hurt feelings that I hadn't fully considered what Patty's behavior meant for Harry's well-being. Do you think Harry is in some kind of danger? I asked. Not physical danger, necessarily. But financial danger, emotional danger, certainly. Mrs. Thompson, Harry is a wealthy man. His house alone is worth close to $500,000. He has substantial retirement savings and a life insurance policy if someone wanted to take advantage of a lonely widower. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood the implications. What can we do? I asked. We need to find out more about this Patty Williams. Who is she really? What's her financial situation? Has she done this before? And we need to try to slow down whatever momentum she's created in Harry's decision-making. How do we do that without making Harry feel like we're ganging up on him? Margaret smiled for the first time since she had arrived. That's where you come in, Mrs. Thompson. Harry cares about you. That much is obvious from the way he talks about you. If you were to reach out to him, express concern about the speed of his decisions, ask him to take more time to think things through, he might listen to you in a way he won't listen to us. But I'm hardly objective in this situation, I pointed out. Harry knows I have feelings for him. Anything I say could be seen as jealousy or spite. Which is exactly why it might carry more weight. If you approach him with genuine concern for his happiness, even at the expense of your own feelings, it will demonstrate a kind of selflessness that might make him pause and reconsider. I thought about Margaret's suggestion while she finished her coffee. The idea of intentionally inserting myself back into Harry's life felt both appealing and terrifying. Appealing because it meant I might be able to help someone I cared about avoid making a serious mistake. Terrifying because it meant opening myself up to more potential hurt and rejection. There's something else, Margaret said as she prepared to leave. David and I are staying in town for a few more days, and we'd like to meet this Patty Williams ourselves. Would you be willing to help arrange that? I'm not sure Patty would want to meet you, especially if she knows you're suspicious of her motives. Then we won't tell her we're suspicious. We'll tell her we're Harry's family, and we want to meet the woman who's brought such happiness into his life. If she's legitimate, she'll welcome the chance to get to know Harry's family. If she's not, she'll try to avoid the meeting or control the circumstances. Exactly. After Margaret left, I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about our conversation. The picture she had painted of Patty as a potential predator was disturbing, but not entirely surprising. I had seen glimpses of calculation in Patty's behavior, but I had attributed it to normal social maneuvering rather than something more sinister. But what if Margaret was right? What if Patty's interest in Harry was primarily financial rather than romantic? What if I had been just the first obstacle in a much larger scheme? The thought made me feel sick, but it also galvanized me into action. Whether or not Patty was a gold digger, Harry deserved to make his decisions based on complete and honest information. He deserved to know that Patty had sabotaged his potential relationship with me. He deserved to understand the full timeline of how their romance had developed. Most importantly, he deserved time to think clearly without pressure or manipulation. I picked up my phone and dialed Harry's number before I could lose my courage. Rose. He sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything all right? Harry, I was wondering if you might have time to meet for coffee tomorrow. There are some things I think you should know, and I'd prefer to tell you in person. There was a long pause. Rose, if this is about Patty and Mead, it's about you, I interrupted. And your family, who are very worried about you. Can you meet me at Cafe Luna at 10 tomorrow morning? Another pause. My family? Rose, what's going on? Just meet me tomorrow, Harry, please. 1 hour of your time, and then you can make whatever decisions you think are best. All right, he said reluctantly. I'll be there. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was no longer thinking about this situation in terms of winning Harry back or competing with Patty for his affections. I was thinking about it in terms of right and wrong, honesty and deception, protecting someone vulnerable from someone who might be taking advantage of them. Tomorrow, I would tell Harry everything I had learned. I would give him the information he needed to make informed choices about his future, and then I would step back and let him decide what he wanted to do with that knowledge. It was the most unselfish thing I had ever done in a romantic situation, and paradoxically, it made me feel more powerful than I had felt in months. Whatever happened next, I would know that I had acted with integrity and genuine care for Harry's well-being. I couldn't control the outcome, but I could control my own actions, and for the first time since walking into Patty's living room 2 days ago, that felt like enough. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my nervous mood as I drove to Cafe Luna. I had spent most of the night rehearsing what I would say to Harry, trying to find words that would convey the seriousness of the situation without sounding like a bitter woman trying to break up his relationship out of spite. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where we could speak privately. Cafe Luna was a cozy place that attracted mostly younger customers, which meant we were unlikely to run into anyone from the community center who might overhear our conversation. Harry arrived exactly on time, looking handsome but tired in a navy sweater and khaki pants. There were lines around his eyes that I didn't remember seeing before, and his usual warm smile seemed forced. Rose, he said, settling into the chair across from me. You look well? Thank you. You look tired. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I haven't been sleeping well lately. Too much on my mind? I suppose. I had already ordered coffee for both of us, remembering his preference for black coffee with honey. When I slid his cup across the table, he looked surprised. You remembered? Of course I remembered. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment, both of us aware that this conversation would change something between us, though neither of us knew exactly what. Harry, I began carefully, before I tell you why I asked you here, I need you to know that I'm not trying to cause trouble between you and Patty. What I'm about to share with you isn't about winning you back or breaking up your relationship. It's about making sure you have all the information you need to make informed decisions about your future. His expression grew wary. That sounds ominous. Yesterday, your daughter-in-law Margaret came to see me. Harry's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Margaret, what was she doing here? She and David are worried about you. They've noticed changes in your behavior, and they're concerned that you're making major life decisions very quickly without thinking them through. What kind of changes? Being secretive. Cutting phone conversations short, talking about selling your house and moving to a senior community after only knowing Patty for 3 weeks. Harry set down his coffee cup with a sharp click. They had no right to involve you in family business. They're scared, Harry. They love you, and they're worried that someone might be taking advantage of your grief and loneliness. Taking advantage. His voice rose slightly. Rose, I'm a grown man. I'm capable of making my own decisions about my life and my relationships. I know you are. But you're making those decisions based on incomplete information. Harry leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. What do you mean by that? This was the moment I had been dreading. Once I said these words, there would be no taking them back, no pretending that the conversation had never happened. Harry, Patty didn't tell you the truth about why I never responded to your dinner invitation. What are you talking about? You told me that Patty called you Saturday morning and said I was having second thoughts about dating, that I felt guilty about betraying Frank's memory and needed more time. That's not what I told her. Harry was very still. What did you tell her? I told her I was nervous about dating again, yes. But I also told her I was working through those feelings and that I was ready to try. I never asked for more time, and I certainly never asked her to interfere with our plans. But she said. She lied, Harry. She used my moments of vulnerability against me to remove me as competition for your affections. I watched the color drain from Harry's face as he processed what I was telling him. That can't be right, he said quietly. Patty wouldn't do that. She's been nothing but supportive and understanding. Has she? Or has she been manipulative and calculating? I pulled out my phone and showed him the notes I had taken during my conversation with Eleanor Patterson. Mrs. Patterson told me that you and Patty have been meeting secretly for 3 weeks, but during regular community center activities, you barely acknowledge each other. She said Patty has been asking detailed questions about your schedule, your interests, your personal life. Harry stared at the phone screen, his jaw working silently. There's more, I said gently. Eleanor saw you and Patty looking at travel brochures together yesterday morning. And according to Margaret, Patty has been making inquiries about joint applications for couples housing at Sunrise Manor. How do you know about Sunrise Manor? Because Margaret did some research after you mentioned moving. Harry, you've been dating this woman for 3 weeks, and she's already planning your living arrangements. Doesn't that strike you as fast? Harry was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup as if it might contain answers. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with confusion and something that might have been hurt. Why are you telling me this, Rose? What do you want from me? I want you to slow down and think clearly. I want you to ask Patty some hard questions about the timeline of your relationship and her motivations. I want you to talk to your family before you sell the house you've lived in for 35 years. And what about you? What do you get out of this? The question pierced me, because it revealed that Harry still didn't understand my motivations. I get the satisfaction of knowing that I tried to protect someone I care about from making a decision he might regret. That's all. Harry, I'm not asking you to choose me over Patty. I'm asking you to choose honesty over deception, careful thought over impulse. Harry rubbed his forehead with one hand, looking suddenly older than his 71 years. This is a lot to process, he said. I know it is. But Harry, there's one more thing you should know. He looked up at me warily. Margaret and David want to meet Patty. As your family, they think they have a right to get to know the woman who's become so important in your life. How do you think Patty will react to that request? I don't know. Think about it. If Patty's intentions are genuine, she'll welcome the chance to meet your family, right? She'll want their approval and blessing. But if her motivations are less pure... I left the sentence unfinished, letting Harry draw his own conclusions. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could see Harry's mind working, probably reviewing the past 3 weeks from this new perspective, looking for signs he might have missed. Rose, he said finally, assuming everything you're telling me is true, why didn't you fight for me? When you found us together at Patty's house, why didn't you confront us? Why didn't you tell me then what she had done? The question caught me off guard. Would it have mattered? I don't know, maybe. But you just walked away. I walked away because I have too much self-respect to fight for someone who doesn't want to be with me. I thought you had made your choice, and I was trying to accept it with dignity. But now you're here, telling me that my choice was based on lies. Now I'm here, because I've learned that your choice wasn't really a choice at all. Patty manipulated the situation so that I was never a real option. Harry leaned forward, his eyes intense. So what are you saying, Rose? Are you saying you want another chance? My heart started racing. This was the question I had been afraid he would ask, because I didn't have a simple answer. I'm saying I want you to have all the information before you make permanent decisions about your future. What you do with that information is up to you. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. Harry? 3 days ago I thought I was falling in love with you. Then I discovered that my best friend had been systematically sabotaging any chance we had together while pursuing you herself. Then I learned that you might be moving in with her and selling your family home after knowing her for 3 weeks. I don't know what I want anymore, except for you to be safe and happy. Harry reached across the table and took my hand, the first physical contact we'd had since that day he had touched my hand in the parking lot. Rose, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with Patty, whatever I discover about her motivations, you didn't deserve what happened to you. You deserved honesty from both of us from the beginning. Thank you for saying that. And I need you to know that my feelings for you were real. They still are real. The connection we had wasn't something I imagined or made up. My eyes filled with tears. Mine were real too. Then why does this feel so complicated? Because trust, once broken, is hard to repair. Because I don't know if I can believe in us when our beginning was built on someone else's lies. Because I'm scared that even if Patty is everything you've described, I'll always wonder if you would have chosen her anyway. Harry squeezed my hand. So what do we do now? No, you go home and think about everything I've told you. You decide whether you want to confront Patty about the lies she told. You decide whether you want to meet with your family and listen to their concerns. You decide whether you want to slow down the pace of this relationship and really get to know who Patty is when she's not trying to impress you. And what about us? I pulled my hand gently from his. There is no us right now, Harry. There can't be, not while you're with someone else, and not while we're both dealing with the aftermath of betrayal. Maybe someday, when the dust settles and we both know where we stand, we can explore what we might have together. But not now? Harry nodded slowly. You're right. It wouldn't be fair to anyone. Will you at least think about what I've told you? Will you ask Patty some hard questions? Yes, he said. I promise I will. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Harry caught my arm gently. Rose, regardless of what happens between us, I want you to know that talking to me today took courage. You could have stayed angry and bitter, but instead you chose to try to protect me from my own poor judgment. That says something beautiful about who you are as a person. I hope you remember that when you're deciding what kind of people you want in your life. I said softly. I drove home with a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. I had done what I felt was right, but now everything was out of my control. Harry would either take my warnings seriously or dismiss them as the jealous ravings of a rejected woman. Patty would either confess to her deceptions or find new ways to manipulate the situation to her advantage. All I could do now was wait and hope that honesty would triumph over manipulation, that genuine care would prove stronger than calculated charm. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Margaret Chen was sitting behind the wheel, and when she saw me, she got out and walked over. How did it go? She asked without preamble. I told him everything. Whether he believes me or acts on it is up to him now. Margaret nodded. David and I have been doing some research on Patty Williams. Would you like to know what we found? My stomach clenched. Is it bad? It's illuminating. Can we go inside? As we walked toward my front door, I realized that this story was far from over. Whatever Margaret and David had discovered about Patty was about to add another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. But I also realized that for the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. I had allies now, people who cared about Harry's well-being as much as I did, people who were willing to fight for truth and honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. Whatever came next, we would face it together. Margaret and I settled in my living room with fresh coffee, but this time the atmosphere was charged with tension rather than friendly conversation. She had brought a manila folder with her, thick with documents and printouts, and she placed it on my coffee table like evidence in a criminal case. Before I show you what we found, Margaret said, I need to know, are you prepared to see this through to the end? Because once you know what I'm about to tell you, you won't be able to pretend ignorance if things get complicated. What kind of complicated? The kind that might require police involvement. My stomach dropped. Police. Margaret opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. Rose, Patty Williams has done this before. Multiple times. She handed me the first document, a printout from a newspaper archive. The headline read, "Local widow accused of elder exploitation. Victim's family seeks restitution." This is from Bakersfield, California 3 years ago, Margaret explained. A woman named Patricia Williams, same spelling, same age as your friend, became romantically involved with a 74-year-old widower named George Henley. Within 2 months of meeting him, she had convinced him to add her name to his bank accounts and deed her his house. When his family intervened, they discovered he had also changed his will to leave everything to her. I stared at the newspaper photo accompanying the article. It was definitely Patty, though her hair was shorter and darker than it was now. What happened to Mr. Henley? The family was able to reverse most of the financial transfers because they could prove diminished mental capacity. George had early-stage dementia that Patty had apparently recognized and exploited. She disappeared before charges could be filed. Margaret handed me another document. This is from Phoenix, Arizona, 18 months ago. Same woman, same pattern. But this time the victim was a recently widowed man named Richard Torres, age 69. This newspaper clipping was more recent, and the photo showed Patty looking almost exactly as she did now. The headline read, "Romance scam targets grieving widower." Richard's daughter became suspicious when her father suddenly announced he was selling the family restaurant that had been in their family for 30 years. She hired a private investigator and discovered that Patricia Williams, who was calling herself Patricia Walker at the time, had convinced Richard to liquidate all his assets so they could start fresh together in a new city. Did she succeed? Partially. She got about $80 in before the family intervened. But again she disappeared before law enforcement could arrest her. I felt sick to my stomach. How many others have there been? These are just the ones we could find with a simple internet search. David thinks there are probably more. Victims who were too embarrassed to report what happened, or whose families handled things privately. Margaret pulled out another document, this one appearing to be some kind of official report. We also found this, a background check we paid for through David's law firm. Patricia Williams has used at least 4 different last names over the past 5 years: Williams, Walker, Wilson, and Webb. She's 68 years old, never been married despite claiming to be a widow, and has no fixed address. She rents short-term furnished apartments or stays in extended stay hotels, always paying cash. She told me she was married to a man named Robert for 30 years and that he died 5 years ago. Complete fabrication. There's no record of a Patricia Williams ever being married to a Robert Williams, Wilson Walker, or Webb in any state where she's lived. I set down the documents with shaking hands. This means Harry is in immediate danger. Yes, it does. And Rose, there's something else. According to the background check, Patty arrived in this area 6 weeks ago. She's been watching and planning from the beginning. 6 weeks ago. That meant she had been in town for 2 weeks before I ever noticed her at the community center, studying the situation and choosing her target. Did she specifically target Harry, or was it random? Based on what happened in the other cases, she probably spent time observing before choosing. Harry would have been an ideal target, recently widowed, wealthy, socially active, but emotionally vulnerable, with family who live far away. And I was just an obstacle to be removed. Exactly. But Rose, your feelings for Harry actually made you a threat to her in a way she might not have anticipated. Romance scammers like Patty usually target men who are completely isolated, men who have no one who cares enough to ask hard questions. The fact that you were developing genuine feelings for Harry meant that someone would be paying attention to his behavior and might notice inconsistencies. I thought about this analysis while staring at the evidence spread across my coffee table. What do we do now? First, we need to warn Harry immediately. Not just about the manipulation, but about the fact that he's dating a career criminal who has stolen thousands of dollars from vulnerable seniors. He might not believe it. He might think we're making it all up to break them apart. Then we'll have to convince him. Rose, according to the other cases, Patty typically moves very fast once she's established trust. She's already got Harry talking about selling his house and moving into a senior community with her. She's probably pushing for joint bank accounts, changes to his will, maybe even marriage. The thought of Patty marrying Harry made me feel physically ill. There's something else we need to consider, Margaret continued. If we confront Patty directly, or if Harry confronts her with this information, she'll probably disappear again. That might protect Harry. But it won't protect the next victim. You think we should involve the police? I think we should document everything carefully, and then make that decision. But first, we need to get Harry away from her influence long enough for him to think clearly. My phone rang, startling both of us. Harry's name appeared on the screen. It's him, I said. Answer it. But don't tell him about this yet, not over the phone. I accepted the call with trembling fingers. Hello, Harry. Rose. His voice sounded strained. Can you come over to my house? I need to talk to you. Is everything all right? I've been thinking about what you told me this morning, and I confronted Patty about the lies she told. My heart started racing. What did she say? Just, can you come over? Please. I don't want to discuss this on the phone. I looked at Margaret, who was nodding vigorously. I'll be right there. Are you alone? Yes. Patty left about an hour ago. She was upset. After I hung up, Margaret and I quickly decided that she would follow me to Harry's house, but wait outside initially. If the situation seemed safe and Harry was receptive to hearing the truth about Patty's background, Margaret would come in with the evidence. Rose? Margaret said as we prepared to leave. Harry is probably feeling confused, betrayed, and embarrassed right now. He might lash out at you because you're the messenger. Try not to take it personally. I understand. And remember, this isn't about winning Harry back anymore. This is about protecting him and potentially stopping a predator from finding her next victim. The drive to Harry's house felt endless, even though it was only 10 minutes from my home. I had never been to his house before. All our interactions had taken place in public spaces, and under different circumstances, I might have been nervous about this level of intimacy. Instead, I was terrified about what I might find. Had Patty become violent when confronted? Had she convinced Harry that I was the real manipulator? Had she already disappeared with whatever she could steal? Harry lived in a beautiful colonial-style house in one of the older neighborhoods in town. The front yard was meticulously maintained, and I could see why he would be reluctant to sell it. This was clearly a family home, filled with decades of memories. He opened the front door before I could ring the bell, looking haggard and older than I had ever seen him. Rose, thank you for coming. He led me into a comfortable living room that was exactly what I would have expected: warm, traditional furniture, family photos on every surface, bookshelves filled with well-read volumes. It was the home of a man who had built a life and intended to stay in one place. Harry, what happened when you talked to Patty? He sat heavily in a recliner that was obviously his usual spot. I asked her about the conversation she had with you, about whether she had accurately represented what you told her, and, at first, she stuck to her story. She insisted that you had asked for more time, that you were conflicted about dating again. But when I pressed her for details, when I asked her to repeat exactly what you had said, she became evasive. Then what? Then I asked her about the timeline of our relationship. I asked her to explain how we had gone from strangers to planning to move in together in the span of 3 weeks. Harry rubbed his eyes tiredly. She became defensive, said I was being ungrateful for her love, that I was letting my family and my jealous female friends poison my mind against her. She called me jealous, among other things. She said you were a bitter woman who couldn't stand to see her friends happy, that you were probably making up lies about her to break us apart. Harry looked at me directly. But Rose, the way she said it, there was a viciousness in her voice I had never heard before. It was like seeing a completely different person. What did you say to that? I told her that regardless of your motivations, the questions you had raised were valid. I told her I wanted to slow down, take more time to get to know each other before making any major decisions. How did she react to that? Harry's expression darkened. She became threatening. She said that if I didn't trust her by now, I never would. She said that real love required leap of faith, and if I wasn't willing to take that leap, then maybe I didn't deserve love at all. She was trying to manipulate you into making impulsive decisions. I can see that now. But at the time, it just made me feel guilty and confused. She was crying, saying that she had never felt this way about anyone before, that she couldn't bear the thought of losing me. But you held your ground. I told her I needed a few days to think. That's when she really exploded. She accused me of being a coward, said I was too broken by grief to recognize genuine love when it was offered to me. She said. Harry paused, looking embarrassed. What did she say, Harry? She said that Margaret had been right about me, that I was a pathetic old man who would die alone because I was too scared to take risks. My blood ran cold. She mentioned Margaret. Yes. She said Margaret had called her, told her that my family thought I was making poor decisions and that they didn't approve of our relationship. Harry, Margaret never called Patty. Margaret doesn't even have her phone number? Harry stared at me. What do you mean? Margaret came to see me first, remember? She had never spoken to Patty directly. If Patty claimed that Margaret called her, she was lying. But how would she know that Margaret was concerned about our relationship? The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with sickening clarity. Harry, has Patty ever been to your house before today? A few times, yes. We've had coffee here, and she helped me sort through some of Margaret's old belongings that I was finally ready to donate. Did she have access to your phone, your mail? Your personal papers? Yes? I suppose she could have. I trusted her. But Rose, why would she go through my private things? I realized that this conversation had reached the point where Harry needed to know everything. The partial truth was no longer sufficient. Harry, I need to call Margaret. There are things about Patty that you need to know, things that go far beyond lying about my feelings or pushing you to make quick decisions. What kind of things? The kind that could put you in serious danger. Will you let Margaret come in and show you what she's discovered? Harry nodded slowly, though I could see fear beginning to replace confusion in his eyes. As I called Margaret, who had been waiting patiently in her car, I wondered how Harry would react to learning that the woman he thought he loved was actually a career criminal who had targeted him from the beginning. Would he be grateful for the warning, or would he be so humiliated that he would lash out at everyone who had tried to help him? Within minutes, Margaret was at the door with her folder of evidence. As she spread the documents across Harry's coffee table, I watched his face go through a series of expressions: disbelief, shock, anger, and finally, a deep sadness that broke my heart. This is the woman I thought I was in love with, he said quietly, staring at a police report from one of Patty's previous scams. Harry, I said gently, you weren't in love with her. You were in love with the person she was pretending to be. The real Patricia Williams is a predator who makes her living by exploiting the grief and loneliness of people like us. How could I have been so stupid? You weren't stupid, Margaret said firmly. You were vulnerable, and she was skilled at recognizing and exploiting vulnerability. This is what she does for a living, Harry. She's had years of practice. Harry picked up one of the newspaper clippings, studying the photo of Patty with her previous victim. She told me I was special, he said. She said she had never felt this way about anyone before. She probably said the same thing to every man she scammed, I replied. It's part of the script, so everything was a lie. Every conversation, every moment we shared. The emotions you felt were real, I said. The connection you thought you were making was real on your side. That's what makes this kind of manipulation so cruel. It uses your genuine capacity for love against you. Harry sat in silence for a long time, processing the magnitude of what he had learned. Finally, he looked up at both of us. What do we do now? Do we call the police? Margaret nodded. We document everything, report what we know, and make sure she can't do this to anyone else. And what about all the things I said to her about my financial situation, about my house, about my will? We'll help you secure everything immediately. Change your passwords, alert your bank, make sure she doesn't have access to any of your accounts or personal information. As we began making a list of protective measures Harry needed to take, I realized that this experience had changed all of us. Harry had learned a painful lesson about trust and vulnerability. Margaret had learned that predators could target even the most intelligent and careful people. And I had learned that sometimes protecting someone you care about means setting aside your own hurt feelings and acting for their greater good. But I also realized that our ordeal with Patty wasn't over yet. She was still out there, probably already looking for her next victim. And she knew that we were onto her, which might make her desperate enough to do something truly dangerous. The real test of our courage was just beginning. The next few hours passed in a blur of urgent activity. Margaret called her husband David, who immediately contacted a lawyer friend specializing in elder law. I called my bank to alert them about potential fraud attempts, even though Patty had never had access to my accounts. Harry sat at his kitchen table, methodically changing passwords and calling financial institutions, his face a mask of controlled anger. The hardest part, Harry said as he hung up from his third bank call, is having to explain to people I've done business with for decades that I nearly fell victim to a romance scam. The shame is almost unbearable. There's no shame in being targeted by a professional criminal, Margaret said firmly. You responded appropriately when presented with evidence. That's what matters. David arrived around 6 o'clock, carrying a briefcase and wearing the serious expression of someone who had dealt with similar cases before. He was a quiet man in his 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and I could see why Harry was fond of him. Dad, he said, embracing Harry warmly. How are you holding up? I've been better, Harry admitted. But I'm grateful to have all of you helping me figure this out. David spread his legal documents on Harry's dining room table, while Margaret heated up some leftover soup she'd found in the refrigerator. It struck me how naturally we had all fallen into taking care of each other, like a family dealing with a crisis together. Based on what Margaret has told me, David said, we need to move quickly on several fronts. First, we need to secure all of your assets and make sure Patricia Williams can't access anything. Second, we need to report this to the police and provide them with all the evidence we've gathered. Third, we need to prepare for the possibility that she might try to retaliate. Retaliate how? Harry asked. These scammers don't like to lose, especially when they've invested weeks building up a target. She might try to contact you again with a different story, maybe claiming she can explain everything. Maybe threatening to hurt herself if you don't take her back, maybe even threatening you directly. As if on cue, Harry's phone buzzed with a text message. We all stared at it like it was a dangerous snake. It's from Patty, Harry said, his voice tight. What does it say? Margaret asked. Harry read aloud. Harry, I know you're upset. But please let me explain. Everything I told you about my past was true. I can prove it. Meet me at the community center tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you don't come, you'll never see me again. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you threw away your last chance at love. The calculated emotional manipulation in the message made me feel sick. Even now, knowing what we knew about her, Patty was still trying to use Harry's fears and insecurities against him. That's textbook manipulation, David said. The false urgency, the threat to disappear forever. The implication that this is his last chance at love. She's trying to pressure him into making an emotional decision before he can think rationally. Should I respond? Harry asked. Absolutely not, Margaret said quickly. Any response will just encourage her to keep trying. But even as we were discussing how to handle Patty's message, Harry's phone buzzed again and again. In the span of 10 minutes, she sent 6 more messages, each one more desperate and manipulative than the last. I'm turning off the phone, Harry said finally. Good idea, David agreed. But first, let me screenshot all of these messages. They're evidence of harassment and could be useful if we need to get a restraining order. As David documented Patty's messages, I found myself thinking about how different this situation was from a normal romantic breakup. In a normal relationship, you might get emotional texts or phone calls from an ex-partner. But they would be rooted in genuine feeling, in real shared history. These messages from Patty were simply tools she was using to try to regain control of her victim. There was no real emotion behind them, just calculation. Rose, Harry said suddenly, I owe you an enormous apology. For what? For doubting your motives when you tried to warn me. For allowing Patty to poison my mind against you. For not seeing that you were trying to protect me. Harry, you don't need to apologize. Patty is a professional manipulator. She knew exactly which buttons to push to make you distrust me. But I should have known better. I've known you for months. I've seen your character, your kindness, your integrity. I should have trusted my own judgment about who you are instead of letting a stranger redefine you for me. His words touched something deep in my heart. This was the Harry I had fallen for, the thoughtful, self-aware man who took responsibility for his mistakes and valued honesty above all else. What matters is that you listened when it counted, I said softly. David looked up from his phone. I've just spoken with Detective Morrison at the police department. She specializes in fraud cases and wants to meet with us first thing Monday morning. She says cases like this are becoming more common, and they're taking them very seriously. Will they be able to arrest her? Harry asked. Probably, if we can prove she's the same person who committed the previous scams. But Dad, you need to understand that there might not be a quick resolution. These cases can take months to investigate and prosecute. What does that mean for Harry's safety? I asked. It means we need to be very careful. Patricia Williams has successfully evaded law enforcement before, and she's demonstrated a willingness to disappear when things get difficult. But she's also shown a pattern of becoming increasingly desperate when she's close to losing a target. Margaret set bowls of soup in front of all of us, but I noticed that none of us had much appetite. "There's something else we need to discuss," she said as she sat down. "Rose, you're probably in danger too." "What do you mean?" "Patty sees you as the person who ruined her plan. In her mind, she would have successfully scammed Harry if you hadn't interfered. Predators like her often blame their victims and the people who try to help their victims rather than taking responsibility for their own actions. The thought that Patty might target me for retaliation was terrifying." "What should I do?" "Same precautions as Harry," David said. "Be aware of your surroundings, don't meet with her under any circumstances. Document any contact she attempts to make with you." "Should I stay somewhere else for a few days?" Harry spoke up before anyone else could answer. "You could stay here." The suggestion hung in the air between us, loaded with implications none of us were quite ready to address. "Harry," I said gently, "I don't think that's appropriate given everything that's happened between us." "Why not? We're both potentially in danger from the same person. It makes sense to look out for each other." "Because," I said, looking around at his family, "your emotions are already complicated enough without adding more confusion to the mix." Margaret surprised me by disagreeing. "Actually, Rose, I think Harry's idea makes sense. You two are the primary witnesses to Patty's behavior. You're both potential targets for retaliation. And frankly, you're both going to be dealing with the emotional aftermath of this betrayal for weeks to come. You might help each other heal. Plus," David added with a slight smile, "the guest room is on the opposite end of the house from the master bedroom. You'd have complete privacy." I looked at Harry, trying to gauge his real feelings about this suggestion. Was he offering out of genuine concern for my safety, or was he trying to salvage something romantic from this disaster? "Harry, why do you want me to stay here?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "Because you're the person who saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life," he said finally. "Because you put my well-being ahead of your own hurt feelings. Because I trust you in a way I haven't trusted anyone in a very long time. And because—" he paused, looking uncertain. "Because what?" "Because I care about what happens to you. And the thought of Patty targeting you, because you tried to help me, is unbearable." His honesty was both touching and problematic. I could see that his feelings for me were still strong, maybe stronger than ever now that he understood how I had tried to protect him. But I also knew that neither of us was in an emotional state to make good decisions about romance. "I'll stay for a few days," I said finally, "but only as friends, Harry. We both need time to process what's happened before we can even think about anything else." "I understand," he said. "Friends." But the way he looked at me when he said it suggested that his definition of friendship included possibilities that mine couldn't quite accommodate yet. As the evening wore on, we developed a plan for the immediate future. David and Margaret would stay in town through the weekend to provide support and help with the police report. Harry and I would both stay at his house, taking basic security precautions and avoiding any contact with Patty. On Monday, we would all meet with the detective and formally file charges. "There's one more thing," David said as he prepared to leave for the hotel where he and Margaret were staying. "We need to warn the community center about Patty. She's been targeting their senior programs, and there might be other vulnerable people she's already identified as potential victims." "I'll call Eleanor Patterson first thing in the morning," I said. "She needs to know what's been happening." After David and Margaret left, Harry and I found ourselves alone together in his house for the first time. The intimacy of the situation was both comforting and awkward. We were two people who had been through a traumatic experience together, but we were also two people with unresolved romantic feelings trying to navigate appropriate boundaries. "The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right," Harry said. "There are fresh towels in the bathroom, and you can use whatever you need." "Thank you. This is very kind of you." "Rose," he said as I started toward the stairs, "I want you to know that having you here, it makes me feel less alone with all of this." "You're not alone, Harry. You have people who care about you." "I know. But it's different with you. You understand what it felt like to be deceived by her because she deceived you too. Margaret and David love me, but they can't really understand the particular kind of humiliation that comes from being fooled by someone you thought you were falling in love with." His words resonated with me because they were absolutely true. The betrayal by Patty had multiple layers. She had lied to both of us, manipulated both of us, and stolen something precious from both of us. Harry and I shared that experience in a way that no one else could fully understand. "We'll get through this," I said. "Both of us? Together?" The question was simple, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid between us. "Together," I agreed. As friends who understand each other. As I settled into Harry's guest room that night, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I had been a lonely widow nursing a secret crush on a man I barely knew. Tonight, I was staying in that same man's house, having helped save him from a dangerous criminal, surrounded by people who had become my allies in a fight for justice and truth. But I also realized that the hardest part of this journey was still ahead of us. We had exposed Patty's deception and protected Harry from immediate financial harm. But we still had to face the legal process, the possibility of her retaliation, and the complex task of rebuilding trust and understanding between Harry and me. Could two people who had been manipulated and lied to find their way to honest love? Could we separate the genuine feelings we had developed from the artificial circumstances that had brought us together? I didn't know. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I was hopeful that we might have the chance to find out. 3 months later, I was sitting in Detective Morrison's office, listening to news I had hardly dared to hope for. "Patricia Williams was arrested yesterday in Tampa, Florida," Detective Morrison said, sliding a folder across her desk to Harry and me. "She was in the process of scamming an 82-year-old widower named Frank Martinez. His grandson got suspicious and called the police." "Will she finally face trial this time?" Harry asked. "Yes. We have solid evidence linking her to at least 5 different romance scams across 4 states, including her attempt to defraud you. She's looking at multiple felony charges and significant prison time." I squeezed Harry's hand, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Over the past 3 months, we had worked closely with law enforcement, providing testimony and evidence that helped build a case against Patty. It hadn't been easy. Reliving the deception and manipulation had been painful for both of us, but knowing that we were protecting future victims had made it worthwhile. "There's more good news," Detective Morrison continued. "The investigation has helped other victims come forward. We now have evidence of at least 12 separate scams dating back 7 years. Patricia Williams is looking at spending the rest of her life in prison." As we left the police station, Harry and I walked slowly to his car, both of us processing the reality that this chapter of our lives was finally closing. "How do you feel?" I asked him, relieved, vindicated, and grateful, he said. "Grateful that you cared enough to fight for the truth, even when it meant risking our friendship." Our relationship over the past 3 months had been a careful dance of healing, rebuilding trust, and slowly allowing ourselves to explore the genuine feelings that had been buried under all the deception and trauma. We had taken things very slowly, much slower than either of us had wanted at times, but we had both agreed that anything real and lasting needed to be built on a foundation of complete honesty and mutual respect. "Harry," I said as we reached his car, "can we take a walk through the park before we go home? I want to talk to you about something." He smiled, that warm, genuine smile I had fallen in love with months ago. Of course, Riverside Park was beautiful in late summer, with mature oak trees providing shade and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of late, blooming flowers. We found our usual bench, the one we had been sitting on every Sunday for the past 2 months, talking through our experiences and slowly rebuilding our connection. "What's on your mind?" Harry asked as we settled onto the bench. "I've been thinking about what Detective Morrison said, about Patty facing justice for what she did to all those people. And I realized that our story isn't really about her at all." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Patty was just the catalyst that brought us together and forced us to discover who we really are and what we really value. The real story is about us choosing truth over deception, integrity over convenience, and love over fear." Harry was quiet for a moment, considering my words. 3 months ago, if someone had told me that I would be grateful for almost getting scammed by a criminal, I would have thought they were crazy. But in a strange way, I am grateful. Why? Because it showed me what you're really made of. When you could have been bitter and vindictive, you chose to protect me. When you could have let me make a terrible mistake out of spite, you chose to save me from it. That kind of character. That's what real love looks like. My heart fluttered at the word love. We had been dancing around it for weeks, both feeling it but neither quite ready to say it, after everything we had been through. "Harry, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "I know we agreed to take things slowly, to rebuild our relationship from the ground up. And I know we said we wouldn't make any major decisions until the legal case was resolved. But now that it is, know that it is." I took a deep breath and looked directly into his kind brown eyes. "I love you. Not the idea of you, not the possibility of not being alone anymore, but you, the real you, the man who takes responsibility for his mistakes, who values honesty even when it's uncomfortable, who puts other people's well-being ahead of his own pride." Harry's eyes filled with tears. "Rosemary Thompson, I have been waiting 3 months to hear you say that. And I love you too. I love your courage, your integrity, your refusal to let other people's bad behavior make you bitter or cynical. I love that you saved me from myself, and I love that you gave us both time to heal before expecting anything from each other." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Harry," I said, my heart racing, "what are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago, before Patty Williams ever entered our lives." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. "Rose, will you marry me?" I stared at the ring, then at Harry's hopeful face, feeling a joy so pure it nearly took my breath away. This wasn't the desperate proposal of a lonely man trying to escape his grief, or the impulsive decision of someone afraid of being alone. This was the carefully considered choice of a man who had learned the difference between manipulation and genuine love. "Yes," I said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." As Harry slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about how different this moment was from what might have been. If Patty had succeeded in her plan, Harry might be married to a criminal right now, his life savings gone, his family alienated, his future destroyed. Instead, he was here with me, whole and safe and surrounded by people who genuinely loved him. "There's something else I want to tell you," Harry said after we had spent several minutes kissing and marveling at the ring on my finger. "What's that?" "I've decided not to sell my house after all. But I would like you to move in with me, to make it our home together. We can redecorate however you like, make it reflect both of our lives and memories." "Are you sure? That house has so many memories of Margaret." "It does. And I want to honor those memories while also creating new ones with you. Margaret would have liked you, Rose. She would have appreciated your strength and your kindness." I leaned against Harry's shoulder, feeling more content than I had in years. "When do you want to get married?" "Tomorrow, if you'd like. But I suspect you'll want to plan something a bit more elaborate." I laughed. "Well, we should probably invite David and Margaret. And Eleanor from the community center. She's been rooting for us from the beginning. And maybe a few other friends who have been part of this journey with us." "What about Patty?" Harry asked. And for a moment I thought he was serious. "Harry Mitchell, if you invite that woman to our wedding, I will personally—" "I'm joking," he said, pulling me closer. "Though I do think we should send her a thank you card in prison. A thank you card? For showing us what we didn't want, so we could recognize what we did want when we found it." 6 weeks later, on a perfect October afternoon, Harry and I were married in the garden of the Riverside Community Center. Eleanor Patterson officiated. She had gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, and the ceremony was attended by about 30 people who had become our chosen family over the months of crisis and healing. David and Margaret were there, of course, along with Harry's daughter Sarah, who had flown in from Portland with her family. Eleanor had invited several other seniors from the community center, people who had become invested in our story and wanted to celebrate our happy ending. But the person I was most grateful to have there was Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a psychologist who specialized in helping victims of romance scams. She had worked with both Harry and me over the past few months, helping us process the trauma of Patty's deception and rebuild our ability to trust our own judgment. Marriage after trauma, Dr. Warren had told us during one of our sessions, can actually be stronger than marriages that begin under easier circumstances. You've already seen each other handle crisis with grace. Free. You've already proven that you'll choose each other's well-being over your own ego. Most couples don't discover those things about each other until they've been together for years. As I stood in the garden holding Harry's hands and promising to love him in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, I thought about how literally those vows applied to our situation. We had already weathered the poor part, the poverty of spirit that comes from being deceived and betrayed. We had already experienced the sickness, part the illness of doubt and fear that follows trauma. We had already survived the bad times, part the weeks of investigation and legal proceedings and emotional recovery. What we had now was the good times, the joy of building a life together based on complete honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. In her brief remarks before pronouncing us husband and wife, Eleanor shared something that brought tears to my eyes. "I've been working at this community center for 20 years, she said, and I've seen a lot of people struggle with loneliness and grief. But I've also seen the incredible resilience of the human heart. Rose and Harry's story reminds us that it's never too late for love, never too late for new beginnings, and never too late to choose courage over fear. But more than that," she continued, "their story reminds us that real love isn't about finding someone who will never hurt you. Real love is about finding someone who will choose honesty even when it's difficult, who will choose your well-being even when it costs them something, who will choose to build something true and lasting even when it requires patience and hard work." As Harry and I kissed for the first time as husband and wife, I felt Frank's presence in the autumn sunshine and the rustling leaves, not as a ghost holding me back, but as a loving memory blessing my new beginning. Later that evening, as Harry and I danced to our wedding song by Etta James, in the community center's small ballroom, he whispered in my ear, "Do you think Patty is watching the news coverage of romance scam awareness events and wondering if we're talking about her?" Over the past few months, Harry and I had become advocates for elder fraud awareness. We had spoken at community groups, written articles for the local newspaper, and worked with law enforcement to educate seniors about romance scams. It had been therapeutic for both of us, turning our painful experience into something that could help protect other people. "I hope so," I said. "I hope she knows that instead of destroying us, she made us stronger and more determined to fight for what's right." "I love you, Mrs. Mitchell," Harry said, spinning me gently around the dance floor. "I love you too, Mr. Mitchell. Forever and always." Built on truth and honesty. As I looked around the room at the faces of the people who had supported us through the darkest period of our lives and were now celebrating our happiness, I realized that this was what genuine community looked like. Not the artificial connections that predators like Patty exploited, but real relationships built on mutual care, shared values, and the willingness to show up for each other when times got difficult. Harry and I had found each other in the midst of deception and manipulation, but we had chosen to build our love on the solid foundation of truth, trust, and mutual respect. We had learned that authentic love isn't something that happens to you, it's something you choose, every day, through your actions and your decisions and your commitment to each other's highest good. 6 months later, we received word that Patricia Williams had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She would be in her 80s before she was eligible for parole. Justice had been served, and other vulnerable seniors would be protected from her predatory behavior. But by that time, Harry and I had moved far beyond thinking about Patty Williams. We were busy building our new life together, traveling to visit David and Margaret in Seattle, renovating the kitchen in our house, volunteering together at the community center, and planning our first anniversary celebration. We had learned that the best revenge against those who try to steal your happiness is to live a life so full of genuine joy, authentic love, and meaningful purpose that their deceptions become irrelevant. On quiet evenings when Harry and I sat on our front porch watching the sunset, he would sometimes take my hand and say, "Thank you for saving me," and I would squeeze his hand and reply, "Thank you for being worth saving." But the truth was, we had saved each other. From loneliness, from despair, from the cynicism that comes from being hurt by people we trusted. We had saved each other by choosing love over fear, truth over convenience, and hope over bitter resignation. At 68 and 71, we had learned that it's never too late for new beginnings, never too late for real love, and never too late to write a better ending to your story. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that begin with two broken hearts choosing to heal together, choosing to trust again, choosing to believe that authentic happiness is not only possible but worth fighting for. Our story began with betrayal, but it ended with a love so genuine, so carefully built, and so deeply rooted in truth that no amount of deception could ever shake it. And if that isn't a happy ending worth waiting 70 years for, I don't know what is.